Hey guys, welcome back again. Today we're going to take a look at some of the other objects in the universe, things we haven't talked about before. Now we've already talked about the sun, earth, and moon, so we know how those work pretty well. We've mentioned the planets, and really you've been studying planets since probably 3rd or 4th grade, so we're not going to spend any additional time on that. So what we're really talking about here today are other objects in our solar system and in the universe. Now, one of those objects are called asteroids. You may know what an asteroid is, and basically an asteroid is just a big rock that's floating around in space. When the solar system was created, a lot of pieces of dust and dirt were left over, and they formed these rocks that are just kind of floating around out there. Now, a lot of these asteroids can be found in what's called an asteroid belt. And in our solar system, the asteroid belt exists in the space between the inner planets and the outer planets, just outside of Mars. These asteroids, they just kind of orbit around the sun like everything else, and for the most part, they're happy. But every now and then, a couple of these asteroids may collide together, or there may be some kind of disturbance in the gravity that pulls one out of orbit, and then it comes flying towards Earth. And when one of those asteroids reaches Earth, and it enters into our atmosphere, we then call them meteors. A meteor is also known as a shooting star. You may have seen some in the night sky. They usually show up as just a streak of light that lasts just a second in the sky. They're usually very quick. Most meteors are pretty small. Some are microscopic. They enter the Earth's atmosphere and they heat up to millions of degrees and burn up pretty quickly. However, some meteors can be rather large, like this one that was photographed over Russia in 2013. This one was huge, and it entered the Earth's atmosphere, exploded just before it reached the Earth, and all those pieces actually caused quite a bit of damage and injured some people. A meteor that enters the Earth's atmosphere and does reach it all the way to the ground is called a meteorite. Now, meteorites can be pretty big, like this one, or they can be smaller, like this one, or they can actually be really small. Matter of fact, most of them are very small. Meteorites can have very unusual textures, like this one, and this one, and this one. Some of them have jewel-like qualities to them, and they can be worth a lot of money. Most meteorites have some type of metal content, so people like to hunt for them using metal detectors. They do this for fun and sometimes for profit. Now, when a meteorite strikes the ground, it can cause quite a bit of damage. And as you know, scientists believe that the extinction of the dinosaurs can be traced to a huge meteorite that landed on Earth millions of years ago. Another object you might see in the night sky is called a comet. A comet is a small celestial body made of ice and dust. We sometimes refer to a comet as a dirty snowball because it has the dirt and the ice in it. Now, the telltale sign of a comet is its tail. This is usually a fuzzy blob with a long streaking tail coming behind it. And what that is as the comet travels through space, the sun burns off some of that ice and releases the dust, and this is what makes the tail. Now, the tail of a comet is always pointing away from the sun, so you can tell where the sun is at, if you couldn't any other way. Comets are kind of mysterious. They have big, long orbits, and mythology has it that comets had special power, and they were destructive. They brought bad luck and disaster to the villages. Most comets are difficult to see. You typically need a telescope to do so. However, some of them that are very bright and come close enough to the Earth can actually be seen with the naked eye. Some of them are so bright that they can actually be seen in the daytime. All right, so that's kind of what we might see in our solar system. But what's out beyond the solar system? What's out beyond Pluto? And the answer is that there's a lot of nothing out there. Space is really, really big and empty for the most part. We call that a vacuum. And a vacuum is a space that is completely empty of all matter. We're talking about dust. We're talking about gases of any kind. It's really about as nothing as you can get. It's so nothing that sound waves can't even pass through a vacuum. But we do know that there are some objects out there past Pluto. We see them every night. We know there are millions of stars in the sky, even billions of stars in the sky. And in 1990, NASA launched the Hubble telescope. Now, this is no normal telescope. This one's 43 feet long. Its mirror is 8 feet in diameter. And when NASA first put it into the sky, it didn't work quite right. It was kind of fuzzy. All the images were not very clear. So they had to do a spacewalk, and they kind of put a pair of glasses on it to correct the image. And once they got the Hubble repaired, and they opened up the door and started looking off into space, they saw an amazing, amazing sight. What we thought were individual stars actually turned out to be galaxies made up of billions of stars. So our thought that the universe was made up of billions of stars was really, really, really underestimated. Each galaxy that the Hubble sees is made of billions of stars. So it made us understand that the universe is really much bigger than we thought it was. So let's take a little closer look at galaxies. A galaxy is millions or sometimes billions of stars, solar systems like our own, dust and gas, all held together by gravity. Now, the most understood type of galaxy is called a spiral galaxy. This is what our Milky Way is like. And it has a very bright, dense core surrounded by these beautiful spiral arms of billions of stars. And it also has these dust lanes. These are not stars, but leftover dust that are not part of the stars. We know that our sun is located towards the outer edge of our galaxy. It's not all the way out, and it's not close to the core. It's more like about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way out. We live in an arm of the galaxy called the local arm, or the Orion arm, and we're one of about 200 billion stars in our galaxy. We don't know for sure. One of the questions that typically comes up is, how do we know what our galaxy looks like? Obviously, man has never even been beyond the moon, so how do we know what the galaxy looks like? And the answer is that we're kind of on the inside of the galaxy looking out. But when we look up into the sky, we don't see nice, even distribution of stars. We see these bands of stars. We call it the Milky Way. Now, in ancient times, way was a road, and Milky is white. So when you see these white bands of stars, we refer to them as the Milky Way. So these bands of stars tell us that we're not in like a sphere of stars. We know that the galaxy is formed into these bands, and by looking at other galaxies far away with this Hubble Space Telescope, we can guesstimate of what our galaxy looks like. Think of it this way. Suppose our sun or you were a pepperoni on a pizza. If you were to look up, you would see the ceiling. You wouldn't see any other pepperonis. If you were to look down, you'd see the table or the floor. You wouldn't see any other pepperonis. But if you looked in towards the middle of the pizza, you would see all kinds of pepperoni. And if you looked out towards the edge, you would see a few pepperonis, but not as middle as looking towards the inside. And that's how we formed what we believe to be the shape of our galaxy. Just by looking around, we can see where there are stars, where there are not stars, and then we can kind of paint a picture of what we think it should look like. Now, within these galaxies, you're going to see another object. It's called a nebula. Plural of that is nebulae, Nebulae. And a nebula is an interstellar region of dust, hydrogen, helium, and other stuff. Now, nebulae are quite beautiful. One of the most recognized constellations in the night sky is Orion, the hunter. And you can see the 3 stars that make up Orion's belt, and hanging down from that belt is his sword. At the tip of his sword is one of the most famous nebula of all, called the Orion Nebula. It's really quite beautiful, but if you were to look at it at night, you would not see these beautiful colors. The colors come from doing time-lapse photography and using special filters and things like that. So you would just see kind of a white patch, but it's still quite beautiful. And the Orion Nebula is often referred to as the nursery for stars. There are new stars here forming. Every million of years or so, a new one formed. But we call it a stellar nursery. Now, the dust and gases often form beautiful shapes. This is called the Horsehead Nebula. It is within the Orion Nebula, but it looks more like kind of a seahorse, I think, than just a horse head. Here's another example. This is called the Eagle Nebula. You have to use your imagination a little bit to see the eagle, but it is there. But these nebula are always quite beautiful, and they are the birthplace of stars. Now, another type of nebula that can be seen in the night sky is called a planetary nebula. You need to understand that it has nothing to do with planets, but they call them planetary nebula because they're kind of circular shaping like a planet might be. What they really are the remains of dying stars. So we saw that a nebula can be a place where stars are born, and now we're seeing that a nebula can be a place where stars are dying. In this case, the star may have been a supernova that exploded, or it could be a star like our star, like our sun, that has blown off its outer shell, and that's what we're seeing here. This is the ring nebula. It looks kind of like a smoke ring. But again, these are from dying stars. All right, in this video, we've looked at some of the objects we might see in our solar system or in the universe. We looked at asteroids. We looked at meteors and meteorites. We took a quick look at comets. And we got kind of an introductory view of galaxies, and we'll look at those a little more deeply. We also talked about nebula, and we said that the nebula were birthplaces of stars and also the graveyard of stars. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I look forward to talking to you again real soon, and keep on learning, my friends.